Welcome to Cinema Convos. This is the show where we bring guests with different tastes in film to have a meaningful discussion about the art of cinema. I'm your host, Yash, and I'm here with my producer, Zach, and our special guest, Kishore. And today we're discussing the film Rush from 2013, which was written by Peter Morgan and directed by Ron Howard, and stars Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl. And Rush is about the merciless 1970s rivalry between Formula One rivals James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Before we get started today, just wanted to issue a quick spoiler warning. We will get into the plot points of this movie, and if you haven't seen it or don't know the history, we recommend checking all that out first. And with that, I wanted to ask you, Kishore, what's your first memory or best memory with this movie?
So hi guys, thank you very much for having me here. It's been a long time planning and making this happen, and I'm finally happy that we're here sitting together talking about it. My first memory with this movie was probably just on the Formula One, like the subreddit on the Reddit page. There was a lot of hype about this, and just even from the conception, like not even when the trailers were coming out, there was talks and there was like people taking pictures of while they were doing the filming and the sets in the different locations. So there's been a lot of talk and a lot of hype about it for a long time. And that was probably one of my first memories. And when it came out, it was one of the few movies that lived up to the hype, I felt at least. I remember Yash, you and I, we went and watched Ford versus Ferrari, and it was the same kind of thing. But like, I wasn't, when I walked out, you were really excited about it, but I was just kind of disappointed about it.
Yeah, I personally love both films for kind of different reasons, but we'll get into more of that for sure.
Yeah, but this was the one where I went in, I loved it, walked out, I loved it, and I still watch it to this day because I think it's deeper than, it's much more deeper than racing. It's much more deeper than the cars or everything else. It's like the characters themselves have a very different. I think they both talk to life in different ways. The way they go,
Sure.
And there's a lot more to it than just the racing of cars and the people. So.
All right. What did you do to the car?
That's information I will share with you under certain conditions only.
Go on.
Guaranteed place in the team and a paid contract on equal terms with Regazzoni for 2 years.
Are you crazy? Clay's a senior figure in Formula One. You're just a rookie. But the only reason we took you on is because you're paying us.
Well, as of now, if you want me to stay, we rip up the contract. I don't pay you a cent.
That's outrageous!
Was he quicker in my car? He was, wasn't he? Did he go 2 seconds faster?
2.3.
So, have a think, work out your priorities, and get back to me.
And that's why I really like the movie. That's why I still watch the movie to this day. And I think over the years too, I kind of connected with, Lauda or Hunt and different portions of my life. And that's constantly changing as well.
All right, Zach, what about you? I mean, I know I showed you this
Yeah,
movie
okay.
last week.
Yeah. The first experience I had with this movie, saw it, I guess, last week. It's pretty recent on my mind. And I'd heard about the story a little bit. Well, I hadn't really heard about the story. I'd heard of Niki Lauda. I'd heard of him. And really the only way I heard of him, so he owned a couple of airlines.
Yeah,
and I flew on one of those airlines, and I was in Austria, and I flew on one of his airlines. I'm like, oh, I met for a guy. Oh, he was a race car driver. Oh, I want to learn about him. And so I knew briefly about him. I didn't really know about the story that much. I knew, besides just knowing about Niki Lauda and the fact that he was a race car driver who owns airlines, I didn't know much else. So I went into it pretty blind, but yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a very, very special movie to me just because it's actually the first R-rated film I saw in the movie theaters. I remember, pulling out my ID, proving that I'm 17 years old, and just watching this movie in XD. And I was just, it's pretty a wild movie for your first R-rated movie in the theater. Yeah, I just, I remember liking it a lot when I first watched it. But over the years, I have grown to love this movie and fully appreciate it. And I think it's one of the most underrated movies of not only that year, but maybe all time, because I feel like no one talks about this movie and it's so good. And yeah, that's my first experience just watching it, in the theater, first R-rated movie. That was kind of exciting. But yeah, for sure. Moving on. I know you already touched on how like the movie has a lot of deep themes and the characters are, they have different outlooks on life. But I wanted to ask you, Kishore, like, what are some of your favorite aspects of this movie? Really anything from like technical elements or like, deeper things than that?
I was wishing you didn't ask me questions about technical elements because I have no idea about it. You've always been like the big movie buff, and you would teach me all these things.
Mm.
So that's not I don't think I can properly comment on any of those aspects. But me personally about the movie the most was just the characters. Like I said, they did a very good job of being very realistic about the rivalry and the plot line. It's kind of hard to. I think there's like no need to dramatize something like this because it's already a very dramatic sport, and the time period in which this was happening is when a lot of people, a lot of like lives were actually lost in Formula One, right? So it was a very dark period of time for racing in general. So there was no need to go extra and overboard about it. And I like the fact that they didn't, and I like the fact that they stuck very close to history. If there's an interview with Niki Lauda himself where he said the movie is probably like 80% accurate, which is pretty. And so in that area, I really like very kind of historical movies in general. And then on top of this, you have the element of the two characters who are complete polar opposites in the way they go about life. One is very cerebral, systematic. He just sets a goal, focuses on it, and almost robotic in many ways, which is Niki Lauda. And James Hunt, on the other hand, he's living in the moment. He enjoys life just in one second at a time, right? He's just in whatever he wants to do, he'll do it. If he wants to feel happy, you find a way to feel happy, right? He doesn't really plan ahead. He doesn't really, systematically work towards goal or anything like that. He just finds a way to do it. And for me, I think a long time I had kind of like the mindset of Niki Lauda, and I was kind of like very robotic and very systematic in the way I go about life because I had a goal I wanted to achieve. But there is something where there's a very, very real benefit to enjoying the journey and not just focusing on the destination and stopping and smelling the roses a little bit along the way. And that's something I learned throughout my years. And so when I rewatch the movies a little bit later on, I can kind of see myself coming from like understanding James Hunt, that entire philosophy too. I remember when I first watched the movie, I thought Hunt was very stupid, and then I was very like pro Lauda. And then now I can kind of see that like changing and shifting. And I think reality is at the end of the day, the perfect person is someone who does both Lauda and Hunt and goes about life. They'd find the perfect balance. And I think that's all we need to do.
I mean, it's essentially, a battle between two completely opposite mindsets, but towards the same goal. And I think they, it kind of shows in the way the movie ends, how they both learn a lot from each other in a way. I think you're totally right. Like, it's good to have a little bit of both. Like James Hunt says, what's the point of winning all the time if you can't even enjoy it? What's the value of it?
So don't let me down now. I need you busting my balls. Get back to work.
I will, Nicky, I will. But I intend to enjoy myself first. Some of life needs to be for pleasure. And what's the point of having a million cups and medals and planes if you don't have any fun? And how's that winning?
And it's just an interesting food for thought. But yeah, for me, you mentioned how you were very pro Niki Lauda when you first watched this movie. For me, it's always been tough. I don't know who I'm rooting for, even when I know what's going to happen, because I think they're both kind of like dislikable at times. But also it's like, I can see where they're coming from, and they both have different obstacles. And I have a hard time deciding who I'm rooting for. But with the way the story plays out, and like Niki Lauda chooses not to race at the end, it makes it easier to root just for James Hunt, because you're like, okay, well, if he's not racing, then I know who I'm rooting for. Zach, what are some of your favorite aspects about it?
It's my favorite aspects. But yeah, well, like you're talking about kind of the relationship between the two drivers. Yeah, they are opposites in a lot of ways. But one thing they really do have in common is confidence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have extreme confidence. It shows in different ways, but they are confident in themselves. I think that's shown with James Hunt in that opening scene with the nurse.
Yeah.
He comes onto her right in as she's helping him. That's extreme confidence, almost arrogance. But he's confident himself. The arrogance is further shown when he's at that first race that they show, that smaller division race. But that's more the arrogant side. And then with Niki Lauda, his confidence, him basically dropping everything, focusing on this one goal. He firmly believes that he is going to be the number one driver in the world, and he puts all of his energy to focusing on that goal. As driver, that takes confidence. Your confidence and your ability to make it happen. And so they are polar opposites in a lot of ways, but they have this confidence thing down. And so I think that is what is really interesting.
Fortunately, a few hands have already gone up. Good people.
Jackie Hicks.
I'm quicker than Jackie.
But he's consistent. Dependable.
A grown-up.
Right, and will he go for that gap when no one else will? Will he put his life on the line the day that it really matters?
Sponsors like him.
What do you want, a driver or a brush salesman?
We want to be successful.
Yes, so do I. But that means beating Nicky Lauda, not being a show pony for sponsors.
I heard about this thing with Nicky.
Everyone has.
You really think you can beat him?
I'd beat him in a McLaren. It's the only car out there as quick as the Ferrari. Which is why I'm here, begging. Look, I'll do whatever you ask. I'll put on a tie. I'll smile for sponsors, say the right things. I can beat this guy, trust me. Just give me the drive.
Yeah, and then as far as who to root for, I feel like I see like more myself and Lauda. That kind of like roboticness for some reason that Niki Lauda has kind of relates. I relate to that a little bit more, and just his drive, and like a lot of people don't believe in him or they think he's crazy. He just keeps doing what he's doing,
Right.
and he proves everyone wrong. I really like admire that. And yeah, it does make him hard to like at times, but for some people would find it hard to like. For me, it makes him easier to like because he just keeps surprising people. Oh, I really like that about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's like these two characters, they're definitely both confident, and they're just confident in different ways. James Hunt happens to have a more charismatic approach to being confident, whereas Niki Lauda will just tell you straight up to your face whatever the truth is in his eyes. And it's I think they're both so entertaining to watch. And that's one thing about this movie that changed a lot for me over the years. When I was younger and I was watching it, I would pretty much be watching it for the racing scenes. But I've grown to really appreciate just how the characters are portrayed, and I think every second of the movie is entertaining because of that. Because this is the first time I think we saw Chris Hemsworth in a role outside of like Thor or like something like big blockbuster, and I was like, this guy can act like for real. And then we talk about Daniel Bruhl, who I think was completely overlooked by the Oscars that year for supporting actor, because he looks just like Niki Lauda, sounds just like Niki Lauda, clearly has done the research. I don't know, and gives such a, at the end of the day, he's a robot, but you really do empathize with him because of what he goes through. And I think one thing that's really fascinating about this movie is that, naturally I'm not the most competitive person in the world. I like to win. Obviously, everyone likes to win. But watching these two guys who are willing to risk their lives to be a champion, it's just a fascinating thing to watch, because I could never do something like that personally, where like the chances of me dying are like 20% or whatever Niki Lauda says in the movie. And but yeah, it makes the movie very like intense and high octane. I also didn't know much about the real story going in, so a lot of the stuff that happens is very it's like sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and it's really interesting how things played out for this group of racers. Like they did that race in the rain because like James Hunt was likable. Like like it's such a small thing, but it played such a big part in how things unfolded.
And that's like actually true in terms of like what happened, and there was no drama. That was not a dramatization in any way. That's actually the way it went down. And Niki Lauda was that unliked, and Hunt was that liked among the group of people. So if you watch the movie and then watch like a lot of interviews where he talks about just the way he talks, you're completely right about how Daniel Bruhl like very, very, very accurately replicated everything. He was a great actor. Like all the mannerisms, all the intonations, the way he speaks, like everything's the same, almost carbon copy. And so when you look at the movie and then you watch like some of these interviews, not only do you understand like how well the movie was made in terms of accurately portraying what actually happened, but then you actually see how good of a job that the actor did, because it's completely spot on. But yeah, I mean, I always think about the two characters a lot all the time. I was very, very initially very pro Lauda, and I acted like him a lot of times. I was just so focused on my own goal that, sometimes I would not be able to, like, I wouldn't think twice about enjoying life or like, hanging out with friends and things like that. I just couldn't at that point in my life, I just couldn't. Right. So I was fixated on getting something done. Now that I've kind of gotten there, then I kind of realized that there's kind of errors in my ways, right? And I kind of realized the importance of just, taking time and enjoying yourself. So like Hunt, I think there is a good balance. I think the ideal way is to be both.
For sure.
Have the drive, and then you have to know when to make sure you're not like missing too much, as you're going down that road.
For sure. I like to think of the two characters as two extremes, and you want to find yourself somewhere like close to the middle.
I accept every time I get in my car. There's 20% chance I could die. And I can live with it. But not 1% more. And today with the rain, the risk is more.
I suppose that all depends on how good you are in the rain.
I have the track record here. I'm the only person in history to do the ring in under 7 minutes. So actually, it's to my advantage to race it today.
Then let's race.
Gentlemen, please. Why are we here, Nicky? Come on.
Well, moving on, this movie is directed by Ron Howard, who I've always seen as the director who does incredible biopics more than anything else.
Yes.
He's made a ton of films and a ton of work. He's even had, I believe, his roots are like in acting when he was pretty young, right, Zach?
Yes. He was on like the Andy Griffith Show, 50s and early 60s, and then when he was in his 20s, he was on Happy Days.
Mm.
So that just kind of so he got his start in acting, and like especially as a kid, he was a child actor, and then he went on to do directing.
Yeah, but as a director, I'm gonna list some of my favorite films by him, and then we can talk more about his style. But some of my favorite Ron Howard films out of what I've seen are I love Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, Cinderella Man. I like The Da Vinci Code, but I wouldn't say I love it. See, whenever he deviates from biopics, it's kind of hit or miss.
I forgot he made that movie.
How the Grinch Stole Christmas is also a Ron Howard film. With Jim Carrey. He directed Solo, a Star Wars story, and most recently he did Hillbilly Elegy, which I personally liked, but it got caught in some criticism, I think. But with this particular movie, I'll get into what I like about it. The racing sequences are very intense and well shot, I think, and it's easy to follow what's going on. Also, one great thing about this movie is like I know Kishore, you're very passionate about like Formula One and racing, but like to enjoy this movie, you don't have to be at all because it's so character focused. And as someone who doesn't really follow racing regularly, I got pretty invested in this particular season because of what they showed me with the characters and the performances. But yeah, in terms of directing, he just does a great job of using slow motion like tastefully, and the sequences in the rain also look very impressive, I think.
Yeah, I think I remember going back to your very, very first question about one of the first memories with this movie.
Mhm.
When the trailers came out, that I remember the it was one of the Kanye songs in the background, but you just hear the song and then you see like the starting grid in Japan where it's in rain, everything is raining, right? And it's very slow motion. Like that's probably one of the first I guess visual memories I have of this movie aside from all the hype. So you're very right. Like you don't have to be you don't have to know anything about the history. You don't know any you don't need to know anything about Formula One. I think maybe one thing that would make a lot of sense or background to know before going into watching this movie is how dangerous the sport was at that time.
Mhm.
And even to that end, they do a very good job of depicting that. People died on it almost. There's a period in time where someone died every year, every season. Someone passed away. So, and
What efforts have they made to like make the sport safer since then?
there's been a lot. I mean, Lada was one of the first proponents of safety, and you see that in the movie too, where he's pushing driver safety and he's pushing unnecessary risks. The drivers at that time, they all came from like the kind of background where you're just like a rich playboy and you just drive cars to have fun, right? They're all very like adrenaline junkies. But Lada was kind of the first one to shift that thinking in that way.
Anyway, look at the way he's driving like an old man.
There's no need to drive fast. Just increases the percentage of risk. We're not in a hurry, I'm not being paid. Right now, with zero incentive or reward, why would I drive fast?
Because I'm asking you to.
Then there was a series of people that came after, and there was actually a very famous racer called Ayrton Senna, and the passing away of Senna was what triggered just massive change. A lot of people around used that moment to completely overhaul the system and put in like all the guidelines and procedures for medical safety. Before at that time, like most of the tracks wouldn't even have like a medical team, or like they'd have just like there was not very organized in any way at all. So he was like what you're seeing in that movie, the fact that someone voiced their opinion about driver safety and about when he uses the percentages, right? He's like, right now that this running this race is like 40% dangerous, but I only accept 20% risk or whatever. Like just to think that way was just radical at that time.
Wow.
So in a way, just him voicing those opinions was a huge change, and I think that's what they were trying to portray in the movie. And then if you follow the history a little bit, if you watch the Senna documentary, like they explain very, very deep, like clearly all the changes they made to the sport. And since then, it's been very, very safe. There's been a few, like, you know, there had been very tragic fatalities, but with every, it's gone a lot better.
That's good. That's good. I mean, it's pretty intense in this movie.
Yeah, those races, like the Japan race at the very end, would not have happened today. Like it wouldn't. There's no.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, one moment I realized watching it most recently is that James Hunt actually, like, you see him learn his lesson because he's like, we should definitely cancel this race, and they're just like, nah, we're doing it. It's like there's no other conversation they had about it. And our other friend we watched this movie with, he was like, why aren't they like having a meeting about this like they did for the other race? Because this is like insanely dangerous.
Yeah, more dangerous like in the other one.
Yeah.
I feel like
I mean, like the Nürburgring track, they say is like notoriously like dangerous, right? And then like even without rain. So yeah. So moving on, we talked a little bit about director style, but this is also, I think, a very well written movie. It's written by Peter Morgan, who is most recently well known for creating the series The Crown, which I also love. I think he creates very authentic dialogue in this movie, and it's not like overwhelming to where like the racing terminology goes over anyone else's head, which is a good balance. I think it's hard to pull off like an authentic dialogue with also like making it easy to understand. So that's my personal thoughts on the writing and directing. I don't know if you guys had anything to add on that.
So yeah, the dialogue, I think, again, when you watch unfortunately there are not many interviews of James Hunt because he passed away like very early on in his life. Lalada has again passed away very recently. He has had much more of a life, and like and because of that, there's a lot more interviews, so you can kind of see his style when he talks. He hasn't lost any of it, even though he's gotten older. He still says things the way it is. He's still very direct. If he thinks something is like bullshit, he'll just say it in an interview.
Yeah.
Like, this is stupid. So,
because in my times where it was very dangerous to drive, I had to put myself into a position that I 100% concentrate on my job. If I do a mistake, I kill myself. And I cannot be disturbed by anything of my 100% concentration, more or less to stay alive over the race weekend. That means you have to block everything out and then do the job.
Once you watch the movie, and then if you watch some of his interviews, you can see a lot of parallels and how good of an actor Daniel Burrow was, how very authentic and very accurate the director did his job. Like, I'm not very familiar with his work, but I've heard of A Beautiful Mind, I've heard of Cinderella Man, and I've heard of this movie, so I can kind of get a taste, which is based of that. The dialogue is very spot on, so it made a lot of sense. I think it's a good team to have some kind of if there was a team to do a movie like this would be the best team because everyone is very good at their job.
And I didn't really even know who Daniel Bruhl was before I watched this movie. Like this is the movie where I was like, this is the guy I want to look out for because he really put in the work here. I think he's the star, even though like all the posters might show Chris Hemsworth's face, maybe for marketing reasons. But Daniel Bruhl is the star of this movie for me. He's so good. And the scene where he's in the hospital is it's brutal to watch, but it really shows who his character is.
That dialogue was true too, actually. Actually, the priest came and he was giving him his final rites, and then he told the priest to fuck off. Like, that's actually
I'm still alive. That's awesome. I love that. I love that he just, it's maybe not someone you want to have as a friend, but it's very entertaining to watch someone who just speaks their mind on screen.
Mm-hmm. So for Ron Howard's directing style, I have a hard time finding, a lot of directors have like a trademark. For Ron Howard, I have a hard time finding one, except for the fact that he does a lot of biopics. And, he doesn't usually write the ones, but like, I don't know what it is. Maybe he's just good at capturing the lives of other people. But I guess that's really his trademark, I guess. Beautiful Mind, Frost, Dixon, Cinderella Man, Apollo 13, this. So yeah, he really can do can capture those lives of other people. Even though I don't think he wrote any of those scripts, he's really good at capturing them. And then I guess for the technical elements, I really like. So there's one thing. So in all the racing sequences, like they really, I love how they capture just how like intense the moment is. They really capture that so well, just how tense it is, especially in the racing scenes where you know something's gonna go wrong. They show a lot more when something's about to go wrong. They show a lot more what's happening inside the car, especially in that scene where Lauda has this wreck.
Yeah.
They're showing scene after scene of just what's happening inside the car, what's happening inside the engine.
Yeah.
And I just think that's how you know, oh, something's gonna happen, because they're really showing what's inside the car. And I think that's a really technical thing. And I guess I haven't seen Apollo 13 in a while, but I feel like they did something similar to that in Apollo 13.
One thing about Apollo 13 that I'll shout out real quick is it's a 90s movie, but it does a really good job of convincing you that they're in space. It doesn't feel fake in any way. This is before Gravity, Interstellar, The Martian, a long time before, and I think it's still one of the great space movies because it's about a real story, and it's that's a great movie too.
That's how it goes with what I'm saying about Ron Howard. He makes you feel like that they're really in space. This makes you feel like a race is really going on, not that just going on. You're in the middle of it.
And also, I think he's big on just authenticity, because I was watching an interview with Niki Lauda, and Kishore, you've probably seen this, but apparently Peter Morgan approached Niki Lauda with the script, the first draft of the script, and Niki Lauda was like, "This is not great." And then after that, they made so many changes, and they asked him a bunch of questions about the littlest of details. Like I think at one point Daniel Bruhl asked him, do you put your helmet on first or your gloves? And he's like, what does he say? He's like, why would I put my gloves on first, I think? Because then I can put my helmet on easily. And it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. So it's the little things that they, consciously put into making this movie just make it that more interesting. So moving on with that, I guess without spoiling it in the interest of Zach, I remember, Kishore, we watched Ford versus Ferrari together, which I also loved. It's one of my favorite films from 2019. But I remember you weren't as crazy about it. So I want to hear some of your thoughts on why you like this movie more than that one, because I think these are the two big racing movies in the last few years, at least.
Yeah, so the thing with Ford versus Ferrari is that I watched the documentary. I think it was on Amazon Video at that time, where it was I think the title again was the 24-hour race. Basically, it was the Ford versus Ferrari rivalry. Le Mans is that racing series, or that that aspect of motorsport I hadn't really followed much. So it was that documentary that got me to watch Le Mans and WEC, World Endurance Championship. So different style of racing, everything is very different. But that's what inspired me to kind of follow that. And then when I got to watching Ford versus Ferrari, it kind of felt like, in many ways, the opposite of Rush. Rush was a movie based on the characters and the history, and everything was very, very, very accurate, and very well done. It was not too dramatic. Ford versus Rush felt like that in many ways. I think all the characters, or the actors, all the characters, it didn't feel very authentic. It felt like it was just the feeling I got out of that, it was like watching first Michael Bay movie from Transformers series. I liked the whole Transformers series. And that movie, and I was like, oh, this is it feels too cheesy in a way.
Look, it's not even a track, Lee. Le Mans 8.5 miles of country road. It's narrow, ungraded, it's rough. There's no camber on the turns, no rails. You got to do that for 24 hours. That means night. Half that race is in the dark, you can't see shit. Cars coming up on you out of nowhere. Drivers stumbling around the track, pouring blood. Maybe one of them's your friend. Maybe he's on fire. You're exhausted, you're hungry, can't remember your name, what country you're in. And all of a sudden you realize you're doing 198 on a straight.
That's what I got out of it. I mean, but then it was you and me and my other friend, right? And we watched the movie. And you guys both really liked it. I was kind of the one in the middle that was like the odd one out that didn't really. But I think at that point, it's just that I don't think that movie was meant, or the target audience wasn't people like me. It was just to get a story out there, just to kind of create some excitement around it. So
I mean, I had another friend who had a complaint about Ford versus Ferrari and how to her it felt like it just kind of went through the motions of a racing movie. It didn't do much different for her. Personally, also, I think one criticism that I love both of these movies so much, but with Ford versus Ferrari, I think I love it so much because of the racing scenes. Whereas Rush, I love the racing scenes, but it's not the only reason I love the movie. It's Matt Damon and Christian Bale do a great job in Ford versus Ferrari, but do I think they give performances to the caliber of Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl? I would say it's debatable that they're better in Rush. But all four of them are great actors. Obviously, I love all of them. Always excited to see their work. Christian Bale, especially. I think Christian Bale is the Daniel Bruhl equivalent for Ford versus Ferrari, because his character is kind of like, just one of those straight up guys.
One thing I found funny, the fact that you mentioned the racing scenes. To me, that's what was the craziest thing about irritated me the most about Ford versus Ferrari, because the problem with the entire thing was that like every time they wanted to go faster, they just find like another gear that like shift up or like press the pedal like harder. But to me, in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't work that way. So that's what it was to me. And then like the racing series itself, like Le Mans is endurance. It's an endurance race. It's not like it's not a speed or sprint race, right? So there's a lot more complexity and a lot more engineering and strategy involved, which is why I really like Le Mans. Like if you watch Le Mans, like it's not very exciting for you as a viewer to see, because it's just a lot of strategy, a lot of tire management, fuel management. There's a lot of like, it's a display of the most advanced technology out there, like hybrid technology, all those kind of things. So you can't really see that like in a short time frame. Like you really have to follow the entire calendar to kind of understand it. So that's why I don't think it mixed well. If Ford versus Ferrari was like a movie about NASCAR or something like that, I can see it because it would make a lot of sense. Everything would make a lot of sense then. But it was just all of that combined but then again, I'm like, that movie wasn't meant for me, so I think I can understand it. I think everything else about it was great. I like the actors, I like the acting. Christian Bale portrayed Miles really well, because he was like that in real life. The story about how Ken Miles at the very end got kind of screwed over by the Ford company was also very true. So those aspects, they kept the same. Certain characters in this were like completely fictional, which is different from Rush. But again, I think for the most part, they did all of that. They did good justice for all of that.
Yes, I think that's the interesting about movies that are based on real topics, because I can't speak for things like them changing the gear shift and all of that. I wouldn't even know that watching the movie. So it's very interesting. Yeah. I guess moving on. This is always kind of a fun one, but what is your favorite scene in the movie, and why is it your favorite scene?
I know the scene off the top of my head. It's after one of the races where I think Lada wins the race, and then they're meeting in the paddock, and James Hunt is coming, and they're having a conversation by Lada's car or something like that. And basically, James Hunt is asking Lada like why he's being such an asshole, right? He should come and like enjoy, like have a party, like get a beer with everyone else. And Lada's like, I don't see a need to. Like, why should I do that? And Lada is going off on like a huge rant about how he doesn't like care for people that are partying and hanging out with a bunch of people talking all this bullshit, and then like it's a waste of my time. I'd rather just go home and sleep early, wake up early, and work hard. And James Hunt was like, but look, man, like you're being like basically he was saying he doesn't want to feel liked. He'd rather feel respected, even if he's not well liked. You're basically saying like, I'm winning, I'm doing the right things. To me, I don't care people like me or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scene you're talking about is one of many scenes in the movie that kind of shows their differing ideologies more than anything else.
I go to bed early, I look after myself, look after my car.
Yes, you're very well behaved.
Go to work, kick ass, and then after the race I go home. Instead of going to bars, we talk all this bullshit with all these assholes.
Assholes?
You should go home often too.
I like that scene a lot because I saw myself in Lada a lot when I was like earlier in my, like when I was, a couple of years ago at undergrad or in college, because I was working so hard towards a goal, and it did act that way. When you get tunnel vision, you just kind of like, it kind of changes you. But looking back to that same scene now, I kind of understand James Hunt's viewpoint a lot more. I think it's very important to just enjoy the journey and not just keep focusing on the destination. So I think that entire, like, these clash of minds is best represented in that one.
Yeah, for sure. What's your favorite scene, Zach?
So I think my favorite scene is probably like toward the end, the final race where like he just like stops the like car. Then they ask him like what's wrong with the car? It's like no, the like car is perfect. Like it's just not like worth you like risk. And that just sort of goes back to him not willing to take unnecessary risks. And like he has no like it's not about the car, it's about him. Like he's basically realized, and that's kind of goes back like in that scene while he's driving and while the visibility is almost zero, he's having flashbacks on everything he holds dear, having memories of his wife, and he's like, it's not worth that. There's some things in this world that are worth more, and like I'm being a champion, and he's realizing that in the race, and that's kind of going counterintuitive to what he's always to the main goal he's had, and that sort of way, he almost is coming a little bit of the perspective that Hunt has a little bit. There's things that are more important. Staying alive is one of those things. As that, and then also like how his like crew chief is like, you want me to tell the like the EDL like there was like something like wrong with the car, and he's like, no, tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I love that.
No, I mean, to your point, like you hit it right on the head. Like that move by him was completely what you won't expect from Lauda. Like he was so fixated on this one goal, and he had the chance to get it, but then he realized there's something more important, and I think that's a big turning point in him as a person. And that was also a big move, like by a driver. Like one of the things that I don't think is not that well represented in a movie is like the pressures of being a Ferrari driver. When you drive for the Ferrari team, like you're not just a driver, like it's a huge pressure. And even now today, it's a great honor. And like people talk about the pressure because the entire nation of Italy is like, if you have a bad race, they'll let you know, and if you have a good
For sure.
So to do that in a car, and to pull out of a race purposely, and there's like no reason for you to pull out, like that was a big move. That was a very radical move by a driver to do that. And I think they actually do. I'll take that back. They do actually kind of talk about like the myth and the legacy of Ferrari, because when Lauda's testing the Ferrari car, and the first time he tests it, he says it's really bad. He's like, it's a shitbox.
Yeah.
And then like the engineer's like, you can't say that about a Ferrari. Like it's not, you can't say that. And then he's like, no, it's shit. And Enzo Ferrari, like the guy, the man behind this brand and behind the legacy, he really respected Lauda a lot. Lauda's one of the few people that could talk to Enzo directly and like just tell him how he feels. And Enzo really respected that about him, as long as Lauda could back up what he said. And I think there was, I don't know if it was in the movie, but there was like a little mini challenge that Lauda was talking bad about the car, and he's like, I can improve it in this and way. And Enzo's like, okay, if you can do it, then we'll see. Then he makes the changes, and then the changes work. And since then, Enzo allowed Lauda to do whatever he wanted, speak in any way you want. Because otherwise, that's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So all that together, that moment was a very big moment, and not just the movie, but like in like just sporting, kind of the context of sporting and safety.
Yeah, I think any scene where the two main characters interact is just entertaining to watch. And I think my favorite scene, there's probably not just one, but the very last time they talk in the movie, I think it's great. It's a great conclusion to the story. I mean, it's based on a true story, but it fits. It feels like the characters are somewhat learned their lessons, and it's just kind of like, that moment where you realize the true story and you take it all in. But also, I think the most satisfying moment in the movie is it's probably fabricated, but when James Hunt just like attacks the reporter after he asked that like horrible question.
And what did your wife say when she saw your face?
She said, sweetie, you don't need a face to drive, you just need the right foot.
I'm being serious. Do you really think your marriage can survive with the way you look now?
And I'm being serious too. Fuck you.
That was true. That's what I'm saying. Well, this is
like the things that are true in this movie are just insane. Like it's But I think that's a moment where you learn that James Hunt has a lot. That's one of the first examples of James Hunt actually having a lot of respect for Niki Lauda, and he knows right from wrong, even though he's kind of like the adventurous like party boy. Yeah, I mean, like it's a horrible thing to ask someone. So
Crazy.
I was, it's just it satisfies the immediate emotion you feel after he asks it, and I think one of the most comedic moments is when those two guys in Italy just like hop in his car and they're like Niki Lauda, like
Yeah.
they're just having a ball, like they're having the best day of their life. They straight up tell him like this car is garbage, but if you drive it, it'll make my life. And I love that because they make you think they're stopping because of his soon-to-be wife, but it's actually because they're like Niki Lauda fans, and I think that's
I
a
love
great
that.
scene. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess those three scenes are probably my top scenes. But honestly, this whole movie, I think every moment is exciting and entertaining in some way, and it's hard to pinpoint like one moment I love. I think when Niki Lauda's in the hospital, it's super tough to watch, but it's a very pivotal moment in the story, and I think the movie just is constantly moving, and I really like that about it.
Hmm.
We've talked about how one of the big themes in the movie is different mentalities towards success and how you can learn from different perspectives. But I guess, are there any other themes in the movie that you find to be profound?
For me, I think every time I rewatch this movie, like I said, I always switch back and forth between Lauda and Hunt as characters. That itself is maybe a trademark of a good movie, because if it's a movie that you can keep watching, and two, you keep learning something new out of it. I read a lot of there's one audiobook that I keep listening to all the time. And every time I listen to the audiobook, I get something different, right? So it's one of the few like pieces of any kind of any book, any cult, like anything, something that's worth rewatching, rereading that's an achievement in itself. But the reason why, like, I would never watch Ford versus Ferrari again. But I think the reason why is because there's a lot going on in it, not just the racing. Like, we can watch Rush just one time for the racing and for the history. Then you can watch Rush one time just to learn about Niki Lauda, and then you'll watch it again just about Hunt, and then you can watch it again about to see how the clash of the different mindsets come together. So I think it's a very intricate, complex movie, and the biggest theme out of that would just be the differing mindsets. I mean, there are two ways to go about achieving a goal. Both ways are equally valid, and at the end of the day, it's not either one is not wrong, because it's just what they place their value and emphasis on. One, Hunt placed his emphasis and valued happiness more than anything else in the world. Lauda,
sure.
Lauda places emphasis, focus, and he values like achievement, and he demonstrates that, or he sees that achievement as like through the championships, right? There's a metric, or there's something to work toward. So there's nothing wrong with either way.
Both approaches, they end up working at some point in their careers. So
Well, I think what I think is most telling about the differences in that approach was Hunt, after he won his first championship, he just retired. He just chilled. Like,
yeah, he became a broadcaster, right? That's what he said at the end.
Yeah, he became a broadcaster. He was a very good broadcaster. He was pretty good about it because all the insights, and he would trash talk a lot of people. Things that he saw were bad. He trash talked the drivers. He lived his life.
And Jarier really is completely out of order. I mean, he really shouldn't be allowed to drive in Grand Prix racing. He's got a mental age of 10 in the first place, and that was absolutely disgraceful for a driver of his experience. And I would think that the authorities have really got to look at driving like that and do something about it, because he should certainly have a short suspension for that, and for being himself, he should have a permanent suspension.
Lauda went on to keep winning, and then he went and started his own airline company because he was passionate about flying, which is kind of random, but it kind of shows you that near the ending scenes, he talks about how flying is good for discipline, right? So he went strategically, found a hobby that not just for the sake of being a hobby, but something to like better himself as a driver. And then he got really passionate about that hobby. He used his hobby as a tool to kind of improve the way of achieving his goal, right? That's like kind of the mindset he had. And then he became the owner of an airline. Mm-hmm. And when he had that accident with his airplane, when he was an owner, like, he took full responsibility, and he did things like, even now when you look at the Boeing 737 MAX, like that whole debacle, Lauda kind of did it the complete opposite way. He spearheaded the investigation. He like made sure that all the responsible parties were involved, and like all the people, all the families got repaid. Like, he made sure everything was set right, and I think that's another, that shows how he is as a person.
Yeah, for sure. I think the big takeaway is just you can get something out of a different perspective, like to achieve your goal. But yeah, I guess I don't have much else to add on that. I don't know if you did, Zach.
There wasn't like one I'd answer, Lauda and Hunt had two complete opposite approaches. They were still champions, their road to get there like was completely opposite, and their road after was completely opposite. But they're both champions, and they can hold on to that. I just think there's multiple ways to live your life, and there really is no wrong answer.
For sure. And this is one of those movies that if you want to look for, deep themes, it has them, but it's also a movie you can watch purely for entertainment, which is I think
sure.
a good balance. I think one thing that's kind of overlooked about this movie is the score. It's done by Hans Zimmer, who's obviously very well known. I think it adds so much to some of the pivotal moments. Like sometimes it'll slowly build into like really fast music, and like I think it's really effectively done. Do you guys feel like the score adds to the movie, or did you guys not really notice it? I don't know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it does.
I think it does. I use it to study sometimes too. It's on a loop. It's a YouTube one that has like 3 hours of this on a loop or something, and I use it to study something. It's you're right. Like it's calm, peaceful, then it makes you feel a little bit motivated, and then
It creates tension in the right places for sure. Like right after, like when the Nürburgring race really starts to pick up, and right before his injury, it's like you feel a difference in the music, and also when James Hunt in the last race is just like, all right, like I'm going, and he just like changes the gear and just goes, and the music changes right away. So I think it's a very very small detail that adds a lot.
I'm not when in the scene of his crash, everything goes silent too, right? So like
Yeah, it becomes like very quiet as soon as the crash happens, but until then, it's like building up, and then it just immediately stops.
Yeah, no, I was saying that they did that very well too. Like you get the build up, everything is there, and then it just goes.
And the fact that that scene where he's burning, like it goes on for so long, it really puts you in the shoes of like this guy is like must be in agonizing pain right now. Like you feel it, and they kind of foreshadow it when they show like the leg of that one racer, like really gross imagery. Like this is a brutal sport in a lot of ways, at least at this time, and they really show that effectively, I think, without like showing too much. Like it's never like gratuitous in any way.
The drivers' meeting in Germany before the race, I swayed the room.
Yes, you did.
That race should never have gone ahead.
No, it shouldn't.
So in many ways, I feel responsible for what happened, and
you were. But trust me, watching you win those races while I was fighting for my life, you were equally responsible for getting me back in the car.
You said that you followed the Formula One season this year, or did you not?
No, I don't follow it at all, actually.
Okay, cool. So what I was going to say is that at the very last, not the very last race, I think the third to last race in the season, there was a huge crash by someone, and the same kind of thing happened. Like he was involved in a whole, like the car was split in half, and he was in flames for like 15, 20 seconds, kind of like the way Lado was. But he came out completely. He came out with bruises and like some kind of like burns to his arms, but otherwise completely fine. And he's made a full recovery now. Right. It reminded a lot of people in the community about the Lada accident. Even the drivers themselves, even that driver himself, he kind of talked about how like this is what Nicky must have felt when he was in his accident. But it also talks to the amount of the progression and safety that has to happen in the sport, because at the end of the day, like his overalls and his suit were completely like mostly fireproof. And then the marshals were right there immediately. The safety car was right there. The medical car was right there. So they were able to take care of things in a very organized, very quick, rapid response. And it was just all of that safety, all of those years of working on safety just put into action. So
for sure. Yeah, sometimes they have to just learn the hard way, I guess, over time.
Yeah, sorry. Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say that before.
No, for sure. I think it's cool that you have all these insights on Formula One. Because I've heard there's a really good Netflix series about Formula One. I don't know if you watched it.
DTS, Drive to Survive?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things. It's a great marketing tool. It's good to get people support, but watch it one season. Watch it, and then I'll explain exactly what actually happened.
Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
That story that you told, like that really shows like how like impactful on the like sport the auto accident was, and that just really showed how the fact that you said he was in flame for 15, 20 seconds wearing a mostly fireproof suit, and there were fire marshals on hand. That really showed that the auto accident and then the other accidents that you mentioned that happened after those are really a wake-up call. It really shows how much more important safety precautions have become in the sport thanks to all those accidents.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, moving forward, this movie I always consider it kind of underrated because I feel like it's a great movie that like almost no one I know has seen outside of like my immediate circle. And I think a big reason of that is because it came out in 2013, very strong year for a film. Some of my personal favorites besides this movie are Wolf of Wall Street, Captain Phillips, Gravity, Star Trek Into Darkness, 12 Years a Slave, Prisoners, The Way Way Back, Fruitville Station, and This Is the End are just some of my favorites. But I think it's a movie that I think has built up more of momentum over time. Do you guys feel like this is an underrated movie, or do you feel like it's like pretty fairly evaluated? I don't know. It only got nominated for 2 Golden Globes and no Oscars, so I feel like it's underrated.
Thing is, I think it's completely underrated. But then I'm also coming from this background where I can really appreciate the very small details and the very all the intricacies and the complexities, and I think that's why I think it's massively underrated. But maybe again, the rating is based on like the global audience, right? The general average viewer. So.
But also, this is a movie it's gotten enough positive votes from audiences to where it's in the IMDb top 250. So maybe it's not as underrated.
It is? Oh wow,
200 something.
In the top 250. Wow. I think it is an underrated movie. I really think it is. Yeah, how you're saying 2013 was a really strong year for movies, and it's not entirely surprising that Hush, it was kind of passed over for the Oscars because, as you said, it was a very strong year. Daniel Bruhl, like you said, he really, it's like,
I think at least a nomination he deserves.
It's awful he didn't get a Best Supporting Actor nomination.
Yeah.
And I have a theory about that, actually.
Okay.
It's really hard for actors that he's kind of in between a lead and a supporting. Like, it's tough. He's the star of the movie, but he's not the star of the movie. Like,
right.
It's, you could argue Chris Hemsworth is the star. He was the draw, but Daniel Bruhl's driving the story. He's narrating the thing.
I think Daniel Bruhl as Niki Lauda is ultimately the heart of the story. I think without it, the movie would not be the same.
True. But I think for awards, I think, especially for voting, roles that fall into that like middle area, I think suffer and they get overlooked.
Do you guys follow basketball by any chance?
Yeah.
Yes.
If I had to compare this movie to a basketball player, it'd be like Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan is a great, he's one of the greatest, and he contributed a lot to the Spurs and their legacy and all of the championships that they won, but you don't really, not many people talk about him because he was such a quiet, calm, he didn't really bring much attention to himself. So
yeah, for sure. So we're approaching the end, and I wanted to ask you, is there anything in the movie that you would change to improve it, or do you think it's perfect the way it is?
I think it's perfect, honestly.
Yeah. What about you, Zach?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say it is like perfect. I can't really tell you exactly what I changed. I really got to think about it. I don't know. I feel like focusing. I don't know. I feel like Olivia Wilde. I feel like the storyline with James Hunt's wife was kind of. I don't know. I feel like it was kind of shoehorned in. I feel like they didn't show enough of her to justify her presence in the movie. I don't know. I guess this is me.
You never wanted to be married in the first place.
Yes, I did.
Oh, come on, James. You did it because you hoped it might change you, settle you down, help with the racing.
No, I didn't.
And who knows, if it had been just the drinking, or the dope, or the infidelity, or the moods, it might even have worked. But when it's all of them...
Yes, I know, I'm terrible.
No, you're not terrible. You're just who you are at this point in your life. God help anyone who wants more.
I think for the most part, that whole subplot kind of showed why he became like so driven, like in the next race, or like his mindset kind of shifted because of the events of that. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of, I guess, no pun intended, a little rushed. But I guess for me, this is a movie that initially I didn't think it was perfect, but over time, I think it's, it's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's because I've watched it so many times and I've grown to appreciate it. It's an example of great filmmaking as well as like just great storytelling and characters. So I would go as far to say it's a perfect movie for what it sets out to do. So kind of taking everything we talked about so far, if you've probably already done this, I'm sure, but if you had to convince someone to watch this movie, what would you tell them? What's your sales pitch?
I mean, I tell them it's a movie about two racers, but it's a movie about two different humans and how they go about life. And it's not a cliche racing movie, but you get to learn about different mindsets and stuff. That would be my pitch. I think more of the pitch, I think it's more about like, it's hard to pitch this, but once you watch it, once you get them into the room and watch it, and then you can like talk about it after. If they're still like awake and not sleeping, then yeah, I think it's I think that's where it is. That's where the match.
What about you, Zach? After your experience with it?
Yeah, no, I sort of say like it's a great pick. It really does a really good job of portraying this historical event, this historical rivalry. You can go into it not knowing anything about racing, and you come out and you feel like you know so much about the sport. You're like, I never knew all this about it, and that's what's great about this movie. Like, it really submerges you into the world of this film. And so, yes, I would just say it's a great pick about racing a rivalry, and it really puts you right in the middle of the action.
For sure, I would kind of say something similar on how it's a very character-driven movie, and it's very exciting to watch in many moments, but it's also just a very unique story in terms of biopics. And one thing, and we've already mentioned this, Niki Lauda, so this movie is 80% accurate. That is an insanely high percentage for a biopic in Hollywood, because Hollywood will change everything. And Ron Howard has done this too with his own films. So the fact this movie's so focused on telling the story as authentically as possible, I think I love that. And it's an entertaining movie. There's not a dull moment. I really don't know how else to say it. It's a movie that doesn't require you to care about Formula One to enjoy.
In hospital, the toughest part of my treatment was the vacuum. Pumping the shit out of my lungs. It was hell. And while doing it, I was watching television. You winning all my points.
Your points?
That bastard hunt, I would say. I hate that. And then one day, the doctor came and said, Mr. Lauda, may I offer a piece of advice? Stop thinking of it as a curse to have been given an enemy in life. It can be a blessing, too. A wise man gets more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. And you know what? He was right. Now look at us. We're both a pair of kids when we met. Hot-headed jerks in Formula 3. Disowned by our families. Headed nowhere. And now we're both champions of the world. It's not bad, huh?
We have reached the end of today's discussion on the film Rush. Thank you, Kishore, for joining us today. And from all of us at Cinema Convos, thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show, give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay up to date on new episodes. And we hope you tune in next time.